Hi everyone, and welcome to our Hangouts on Air. Today we have AppScript and we have Arun, a developer advocate, joining us. Today Arun's going to talk about a quick overview of AppScript and how to use it in the beginning, and then he's going to go over updates that have happened in AppScript in the last year. If you have any questions, we'll be doing a Q&A at the end, so go ahead and post those questions to our Enterprise Plus page. All right, Arun, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you very much, Debbie. Hopefully you guys can hear me all right. My name is Arun Nagarajan. I'm from the New York office, and it's really nice to be on air with all of you folks. Today we'll be talking about Google Apps Script. Google Apps Script is this exciting technology that allows you to do more with Google Apps. Google Apps, of course, includes really popular tools and services like Gmail, Drive, Calendar, obviously spreadsheets, and all these different tools that a lot of enterprises are using, and of course a lot of consumers and students and in use case in education as well. And one of the nice things about AppScript is that it's this really straightforward technology that's very standards-based that you can pick up very easily and build interesting things right away for yourselves, for your company, for a small group of folks, and so on. So there's a lot of interesting things that you can do. And one of the things you'll notice is the sort of the tagline that I have here on my screen screen share here is about getting the most out of Google Apps. And hopefully you'll see that as we go along, particularly around some of the newer things we've launched in the last year since Google I/O timeframe. So let's get started. So what we'll do is we'll do about 5 to 10 minutes worth of slides to just orient the folks that are new to Google Apps Script, and then we'll spend some time doing some live demos, and hopefully all will go smooth, and we'll take questions as well. So let's get started. So I'll walk through my slides on this computer here. Before I start diving into some of the technical details of AppScript, there are 3 things about it that are important to understand as a developer. The first thing is that AppScript is just JavaScript. AppScript allows you to use your JavaScript knowledge, all the things that you're used to in JavaScript with prototypes and the way you'd want to do objects. All of that works in an AppScript. It's basically JavaScript with a set of additional APIs that runs on the Google servers that allows you to do this sort of interesting integrations and extensions. It's compliant, so like I said, it's standards-based, and it's actually pretty performant as well. You'll see that a lot of things run pretty quickly, even though it's running on the Google Data Center side of things. The second thing that's really interesting about AppScript is that it is super straightforward to get started. No need to set up an IDE, no need to set up complex tools that are difficult to get started with for beginner programmers or for folks that are on a Chromebook, for instance. You can go to script.google.com right as I'm giving this hangout, and you can get started with writing AppScript. So it's really straightforward, and obviously we're looking for more ways to allow you to author your code in different environments, but the simplicity and the accessibility of AppScript is always in the beauty of the fact that it's stored in Drive, it's easy to get to, and it's all based on and it runs in a browser. And the last thing that is sort of uniquely Google Apps about this whole environment is the APIs. So we have APIs for Google Forms, Google Docs, Google Sheets, Sites, Drive, obviously, and all these different moving pieces that allows you to stitch together a cohesive workflow or interesting scenario that you're trying to solve. And I'll kind of point out some of the interesting use cases that we see our customers and partners working on, and hopefully that'll give you an idea of what's possible for your own business and group. But that's the real important part that hopefully you'll take away with. Is that it's a set of APIs that makes it really straightforward to integrate with these different pieces. And not only that, one of the things you'll see towards the end is that it's nice to be able to integrate and write glue that connects between a doc and a spreadsheet, but really where it gets really interesting is when you can surface interfaces, user interfaces, within docs or spreadsheets. So you'll see some examples of that, and that's really where the platform is going to be, I think, real powerful to you, is that you can actually deploy these things, these apps, these little scripts you write, to your end users without them having to be technical folks. So before I think we talk about the future and the road and where we are, it's always important to kind of let you know that what's possible. So when you talk about the APIs for all the different Google products, you can see that the list is quite large. So starting from Calendar all the way down to spreadsheets, and the list is actually growing. So we're focusing on enabling some of the more modern APIs that we have, and you'll hear more about that in the future. But our focus is to enable easy access to any Google product in a nice scripting environment. That's really important for us. And like I said, the second bucket is about communications and UI, and the UI part is real important. Well, what we mean by that is being able to surface your business logic through an interface within a document or spreadsheet. So think of a document that's getting shared around. Wouldn't it be nice if there was a sidebar where you could collect some additional metadata or conduct workflow? So that's some of the things that we're focusing on. And of course, we don't want you to reinvent the wheel. Whenever there is a scenario where you're storing or caching data or parsing dates, things like that, we want to have a bunch of utilities baked in for you. So the last bucket's all about making your programming lives easier. Wanted to have a quick slide here about history as far as where AppScript has come from and where, hopefully that'll signal some of the things we're focusing on. It started out in 2009 as a feature of Google Spreadsheets. So AppScript started as a way with which you could evaluate custom functions in JavaScript within Google Spreadsheets. Now, it's come a long way since then. We've added a bunch of capabilities along the way, surfacing UI within spreadsheets, being able to have scripts in sites. We added the ability to have HTML to build these interfaces back in 2012 at Google I/O. And in 2013, we actually had a pretty big year, and it continues on. We added the ability to have scripts in Google Docs and scripts in Google Forms. Google Forms is one of those super lightweight tools that I think I'm always amazed at some of the workflows that people have been able to build with it. For the folks that are not familiar, Forms allows you to collect structured data into a spreadsheet or within the form itself, and we released a major refresh to Forms right before Google I/O. That enabled us to also provide an API along with it, and you'll see some of that in an example here. But as you can see, we're kind of getting our APIs established in all these different properties, and Forms and some of the new enhancements of the Drive API are the latest in that effort. Here's an example of a Google Form API, and you can see that it's really that straightforward. So JavaScript on the left, that's AppScript, and the end result on the right. So that shows you that a simple, I think that's about 7-8 lines of code, can create a Google form and then actually send it out. So that's pretty powerful stuff that you can see that it's really easy to get started, and it reads really easy. You don't have to be a programming expert to be able to build this. Let's get to, we also launched improvements in Google Drive, so ability to do everything you can do in the UI in the API. So being able to share, being able to manage permissions, iterating through larger result set. That's one of the things we improved recently. So that's one of the nice things about the Google Drive API. Another thing that we improved on is the ability to have the authorization screen look a bit more, I would say, modern and professional in some cases. You can see that this authorization screen for the same script, side by side, and you can see that the one on the right is a lot better and friendlier for your users. So we improved that, made it more consistent using OAuth 2 behind the scenes so that your users know what they're clicking on and what they're approving, while at the same time, as developers, not scaring away your users. So let's take a look at a simple script in action. Wanted to have a very simple sample before we do anything live, just so people get oriented. So here's a very simple function. You can run and copy and paste it. What this does is it reads a spreadsheet cell's value. So you have an address, that's the address of the New York Google office. You can very easily then take that address, convert it into a static map, a one-line API there, and then use the Gmail service to send the link to that static map to an email address. Really that straightforward. So obviously this by itself, when we talk about a mashup, this is talking to spreadsheets, maps, mail, and it's pretty powerful in that regard. But you can really, the value comes to this when you bake in your own custom workflow. So if you're having a dinner party and you want to email all your guests directions, you can do that based on where they're starting from. So these are the things that you can think about now about some of the automation capabilities that are possible to take the capabilities that a spreadsheet has, but then adding much more additional features to them. Let's talk about some of the use cases. I alluded to some of this that was possible before. And of course, as you're looking at this list of use cases, I think a lot of interesting use cases are an amalgamation of a few of these options. So definitely think about how you can take some of these ideas and make it your own. The first one that's the most common one that we see is around workflows. So workflow is essentially a process that involves multiple people over multiple days or weeks or whatever through multiple access points. So either when they're when they're mobile or when they're on a desktop. So when you think about a document approval, really straightforward workflow. Someone drafts a document, it has to get reviewed by their manager, has to get reviewed by legal, has to get reviewed by marketing, and then ultimately it's approved, and a non-editable version of it gets snatched to a particular folder. Very straightforward process for approval, and you can see that how AppScript might allow you to do that. It can send people emails. It can send people. It can share documents to with people. It can make snapshots of these documents. So it's really kind of very straightforward to build these. And not only that, it can actually track using some of our storage mechanism when was the last time an email was sent, and then remind them that you haven't approved this. Hey, you have a pending approval. Things like that. So you can kind of build these kind of fairly powerful things. Resource management. We have APIs for calendar, so you can think about how you can look at how conference rooms are getting utilized, or how much time is your team spending on various meetings and things like that. Automation, that's sort of the root for a lot of the workflow that I mentioned. Reporting, so being able to build nice dashboards, we have APIs for that. Integration, we have ability to call out to external APIs like Salesforce and Twitter, and you can connect and exchange data between Google Apps and these other cloud services. And we even have a JDBC plugin. So if you have a database that's exposed with password protection, we can connect to that and exchange data with it as well. And the last one's particularly interesting to Google Apps administrators. So if you're someone that manages the Google Apps domain, you can actually create users, you can actually provision files for them. So when you think about sort of a starter script for a new user or a deprovisioning of a user, there are some scripts that you can write to automate that workflow. Very lightweight, easy to manage, easy to tweak. That's something that AppScript is pretty good at. A couple of use cases here. Here's an example of grading with
Hey Arun, I think we lost your sound for a second there.
What was the last thing you heard?
Right before you started talking about grading made easy.
Okay. So just talking about domain administration, did you catch that part?
Yes, we got that part.
Okay, I apologize.
You sound really quiet right now.
Quiet? Okay, let me lean in a little bit.
There you go.
Okay. So we have a complicated setup here with multiple laptops, so I apologize if something is lost. Thanks for letting me know, Debbie. So in the interest of time, I'll kind of skip through some of these. I'll just flash them so that you can go check them out on your own. Grading example, mail merge. Just search for mail merge in AppScript, and you'll see a lot of different ways to do this. This is an interesting example of vacation calendar. So being able to inject events into a calendar, into a shared calendar, that you can see who's on vacation or out sick that day. So this one doesn't have a specific UI it builds. It just provides the data into the existing interface that it already has. All right. So let's do some quick examples of demos through demos. I think that's the most effective way to showcase some of these things. So here I have a test account, regular Drive interface. What I'll do is go to script.google.com. Easiest way to get started with AppScript, and a lot of interesting things can be built right off this particular interface. So from here, this welcome screen allows you to pick and choose from a bunch of templates we have. These don't really set any properties on the project as much as create a template. So for today, we'll do Google Forms. So I'll select Form. And what this will do, you can see, is it essentially seeds the script editor with a bunch of code. And I'll zoom in a little bit so that it's more visible. But this is a fairly functional script editor running within a browser. So you have syntax highlighting, you have a nice menu bar, and things that are familiar with you as well because of your because you're using Drive in a lot of cases. So this feels familiar. All this HOA Forms demo. And what I'll do is I'll just go ahead and run the first function, create form, and in this demo we'll just run the script from a script editor itself. I have to give it authorization. Very quickly I'll go through that, and it should run pretty quickly. And I have a fake spreadsheet ID. That's okay. I'll just comment that out. But I should have a script already. The script should have already run. So I'll go to Drive, And in my drive, you'll see that there's now a Google form that was created. Scripts under feedback, how would you rate your experience, and so on. So let me actually do a simple thing here where I'll put these side by side so that you can see how the code and the form actually interact. Let's go here. And so you can see that this is the code that created this form. And what I'll actually do is instead of creating a new form, I'll say dot, and you can see this is one of the great areas I really like, which is the autocomplete. I can say open by URL, paste in the URL that we had, and I will then be able to run this again. If I say create form, well, it's not really creating a form, but that's okay. So if I run this again, you can see that on the right, the form is updating in real time. Right? So you have sort of that live update feel that a lot of Google apps have, Docs, whatnot. I can also go in here and say delete item 0. If I go and run this now, you'll see that the first item should disappear. So that hopefully gives you a sense for how you can use Google Forms to build these really interesting use cases. So I'll just run this a couple more times to delete the fields. And what I'll do now is point out some of the new things that we added in Google Forms recently. In our blog, if you go to our blog, googleappsdeveloper.blogspot.com, one of the things that we added was we recently updated the Forms API to reflect the latest additions in the apps in the Google Forms product itself. So one of the things that the Forms team added was the ability to embed a YouTube video right within Google Forms, and we followed suit and we added that capability right within the API as well. So here's an example of a very straightforward form. So you can see that it's got a video, sort of a couple of options, and then also a progress bar. So we'll go back here. We'll come back to the form where we can see them side by side, and I'll actually go ahead and delete these properties. And I'll just paste this code in from the blog, the sample, and I'll run it again. And this should run. Set video URL. Oop, typo there. You can see that it's actually helping me when I have mistakes in my code. And there it is. That's the video of our team doing a demo at Google I/O with the Forms API, and then a couple of options that get programmatically added. So hopefully this gives you a sense for how you can automate some of the workflows about building a Google form dynamically and actually sending it out to a few people. That's a quick bit on Google Form. I'll take a couple more minutes to show one other capability that we added recently. So again, if you go back to our blog, we added the ability to have data validation added programmatically to a spreadsheet. So hopefully this gives you a sense that you should also follow our blog. We do a lot of interesting posts on a fairly regular basis, but mostly around announcements that you'll see some interesting things there. Here's the
Hey Arun, your sound dropped off again.
How's that now?
Still pretty quiet.
No? Better?
No.
Okay. Let me just check to see what's going on with my sound. How's that better?
A little better.
Okay. I'm not sure what's going on there with the sound. So let me actually do the last bit of demo really quickly while the sound quality stays okay. Here's an example for the sidebar. Is it okay?
Yep, it's okay now.
Okay, cool. So we had a blog post around the sidebar API that we added, along with the ability to have cursor selection and the position of the cursor. So this is really an interesting improvement in our examples here, because this allows you to do some really interesting deep integrations into Google Docs. So an example that we have here is a bibliography app. So a very common capability for Google Docs. You may have write a really detailed report. One of the things that we wanted to illustrate was the fact that you can add your own custom menus to Google Docs. So here's an example of Beepstro. It's a fictitious product name we came up with. If I go to Beepstro, Manage Sources, you can see that the sidebar comes up. This sidebar was entirely custom. built using supported APIs that essentially loads all the different citations, and I can add a new source. This can bring up a new dialog, and this is again a nice form that I can walk through. All of this using Google Apps Script. So all the interfaces are built with HTML, but it's surfaced and stored and interacts with the document using AppScript. We also made all the code open source, so you can go to Tools, Script Editor for this particular document and see all the code that's necessary to make something like this work. So feel free to walk through it, and you'll get a lot of really interesting things out of it. We're adding the ability to, in the near future, the distribution for these types of scripts will come in. But in the meantime, we are really looking forward to what kind of apps and scripts that you can build with this kind of capability. So we're coming close to time. I wanted to save some time for Q&A. Debbie, I don't know if I have a few more minutes, or how are we doing on time here?
You have 2 more minutes before we need to start Q&A. Okay,
cool. So I wanted to point out a few different resources. So obviously our blog is a great way to connect with us. You'll see from here we'll link to our GitHub page and really all sorts of other places where you can learn more about AppScript. So all of this is under github.com/google/apps-script-samples. A lot easier to just search for it sometimes. But here you can see we have 3 different samples where you can see all of some of the capabilities that I alluded to in action. We also have a really good documentation page. So great way to get started with AppScript is doing one of these quick starts, and they really do take 5 minutes, in some cases maybe even less. And great way to learn about AppScript capabilities, but more importantly, just getting familiar with all the different moving pieces. How do you authorize a script? How do you start a new script? How do you save it and retrieve it? Things like that. So really great way to get started. And we have some sort of intermediate level tutorials that have much more complicated use cases as well that you can go through. We also have a Google Plus community that just recently hit 3,000 people. Encourage you all to search for it and join. A great way to ask questions, have a conversation with other folks. So this is Google Apps Script. It's on Google Plus. Very, very active community with a lot of people that respond to questions right away. And the last thing that I'll point out is the Stack Overflow forums that we have. Support and go to How to Get Help. One of the areas that you'll see a lot of really good interaction is on Stack Overflow, where people will ask a lot of questions and you'll mostly get responses within a day, and in some cases maybe even sooner. So great way to go and get help as you go along in building your services and your apps. With that, I'll save some time for Q&A, and hopefully I'll be able to clarify anything that I overlooked.
All right, so first thing we want to ask is, what's the cost of AppScript?
So that's a really good question. AppScript is completely free. There's no additional cost associated with AppScript. So if you have a Gmail account, you can start writing scripts today. There are quotas that are different based on whether you have Google Apps for Business versus the personal edition. So if you go to script.google.com/dashboard, I believe I'm typing that right, you'll be able to see that there's a tab called Quota Limits, and here's sort of the details around quotas. So consumer is sort of a regular Gmail account, and Google Apps for Business includes the education instance, the government instance, and the business instance. And then this is the legacy free version that we had that we discontinued about a year ago. But this kind of tells you what quotas you have for different operations, including things like Gmail, message send, making URL fetch calls to external services, and so on. So there's no additional cost associated with AppScript, and it goes off of the documented quotas that we have.
Cool, thanks. How do you debug and troubleshoot AppScript?
So it's a good thing I'm switching to the script editor. There are a couple of resources that we have for troubleshooting AppScript code. The first one is the debugger itself. So you won't, it's hard to kind of see, but there is a little debug symbol here, and what you can do is actually hit breakpoints using the little clicking into the gutter, and then when you run it in that mode, it'll actually pause execution where your line is, and then you can inspect variables, and you can start taking a look at different state and things like that. What we also have, maybe I didn't run it properly, What we also have is the ability to look at logs. You go to View, Logs, and you can see everything that you're logging. So you can see that there's a logger.log capability. So this is a great way to leave cookie crumbs if you have a complicated code base and you want to know what the state of various things are. So logs. And we also have what's called execution transcript, which allows you to see how things ran and in some cases how long it took as well. So those are some of the things that you can do to debug your code. One of the things I didn't talk about is triggers. So you can actually run triggers, which allows you to create the code, run the code automatically at a clock. In here, there's a concept of notifications, which can send you failure notifications at the time specified, including immediately. So if you're debugging triggers, I recommend flipping it to immediately, which allows you to get a lot of information about what's happening.
Cool. All right. How about sharing your code with other developers? How do you do that?
So there are two ways you can share your code. So the regular drive sharing works just fine. So this little share button, if you put someone's address here, they'll get it, just like a Google document. One of the things that you can also do is we have the ability to include in libraries. So anyone that's used other programming platforms like Java or .NET will know this concept of libraries. So what you can do is go to Resources, Manage Libraries, and you can put in a library key and include that as a resource to your project. In which case, things like autocomplete from that library work. You can get that code updated by changing the version. I don't have another key handy, but that's how this will work. You still need to have read access to that library, but this is a great way to prevent the whole copy and paste mess that can get started when you have a lot of people writing scripts. So that's how there are two different ways you can share this project itself, or just to have it be included as a library.
Cool. All right. How about finally, why don't we figure out what are some interesting use cases for enterprises if they want to use AppScript?
Yeah, so this one comes up a lot. I think it really starts off with individual use cases. It's a great way to get familiar with AppScript. So if you find yourself, not wanting to know how many meetings you've had in a given week. So you may want to write a little app that just goes through your calendar and then sends you a report on Monday morning saying, here's all your meetings for the week that are scheduled. So that's one of the things that you can get written pretty easily, and it's also immediately valuable. When you graduate from that and start thinking about how do I make my team and my company more effective with AppScript, there are a lot of interesting use cases around workflow, like I mentioned. So any time where you're using spreadsheets or forms or Drive as a part of your workflow, where something needs to end up in Drive or something needs to get shared out of Drive, think about what are manual processes in that flow, and think about what's possible in AppScript and see if you can make that connection. That allows you to take the manual parts out, which is sort of the boring part a lot of times, and also prevent errors or just plain forgetting running a workflow process. So, so to recap, start small with individual use cases, but then try to figure out what are the bigger use cases where your team is running through a lot of different pieces. One thing that we do internally a lot of times is use AppScript for project tracking in a spreadsheet. So it'll, on a weekly basis, send an email for status, change colors of different cells based on updates, read from internal resources, and update a spreadsheet automatically, and things like that. So there's probably a lot of use cases like that that you can come up with.
Great. Thanks, Arun. I think that's all we have for today. So thank you so much for joining us. And for everyone out there, I hope you guys learned something today. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you.